Welcome to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kibler, your net profit CFO, helping business owners like you grow their net profit one episode at a time. And now your host, Ryan Kibler.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Net Profit Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Kibler, the Net Profit CFO. Today, I've got a very good friend with me, Jared Ribley from Capstone Mergers and Acquisitions. Today, we are going to cover some topics on exit planning. I just got through sharing with Jared offline here that exit planning is something that's been coming to the forefront for me lately. I think it has for a lot of business owners. And so we're really going to dive into the topic. And Jared is the person to talk to. So very, very excited to dive into the conversation today. Jared, thank you so much for taking the time and joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I want to give you an opportunity. You have your CEPA certification, which is Certified Exit Planning Advisors. I know you're starting a CEPA chapter here in St. Louis, but give my audience a little bit of background on you. I know you've also been in the industry for a little while, doing a lot of business sales. So give a little bit of background on you and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I've been selling privately held companies for about 14 years now. It's been a journey. It's still a journey. You continue to learn every day, new ways to help the clients. And it's just very dynamic because this industry teaches you a lot about psychology, obviously financial analyzation, negotiation, marketing, legality. Just it's a smattering of different buckets that you get to touch. So it's a great industry. Maybe not the easiest at times, but it's equally as rewarding. So I started at maybe the largest business brokerage firm at that time in St. Louis. Spent about 7 years there. I was the young guy back then. Now I'm somewhere in the middle. And everybody was 15, 20 years my senior. And it was just great to have enough, I think, wisdom to show up and basically eavesdrop on everybody else's conversation and kind of self-teach, learn through osmosis, etc. So I did a lot of that for about 7 years, had a good career, and then was recruited by another business brokerage firm. They had started but didn't have a lot of traction, needed some organizational structure and overhaul. So did a lot of work there, and then was recruited about 3 years ago by my now partner who owns Clayton Capital, Kevin Short. Him and I, and the genesis for Capstone M&A was to legitimately find a way to service the client and the process better. Every industry, every business says we want to differentiate. So it was more than just a lofty goal. It was, what are we going to do in terms of best practice, technology, those types of things that's actually going to quantify a better result. And fast forward, we've done that. And we're continuing to learn every day. But by and large, our sell rate is hovering around 60% currently, which is a little bit more than half or a little bit more than twice the national average in terms of sale rates. So for more than every 1 in 2 clients that we go to market with, we're selling them and we're finishing the transaction. So it's nice to be able to quantify that. We focus mainly on enterprise value of 1 to 20, 25 million at a time, completely industry agnostic. But a lot of times that range of business owner, client, and business itself is a little bit too complex for Main Street business broker and not large enough for investment banks. So there's a real opportunity to do it differently there. And we've been met with a great response and been reinforced that that is really a great place to play in. And the exit planning stuff, just to touch on that, it does coincide. We don't do the succession planning. We have a very singular focus, which is the transaction itself. However, our world touches that world quite frequently. And so I got through EPI, the Exit Planning Institute, based in Cleveland, Ohio. This was about 7 years ago. Went and got that certification because it interested me. I wanted to create more human capital for what I do, and it's worked. The two big things would be incorporating what EPI teaches in terms of best practices into our little sphere of the ecosystem. And then in addition to that, the community. When you're working with other CEPAs and people, advisors that have this certification, it's kind of instant best friend. You get to immediately understand where you're starting from, which is very valuable. And
For sure.
that has kind of been the overview there. And I can go into a little bit more how we've incorporated the EPI teachings into our best practices as well. But I'll stop there. There was a lot of words.
Sure. No, I love the background story, and I really love your guys' mission, right? That you're really out to serve the clients in a better way in an industry that maybe hadn't been refreshed in a while like that, or looked at it from that angle in a while. And I also love that you guys have been doing that and had that focus long enough that you've got a sell rate, twice as high as what the national average is. I mean, that to me really speaks volumes. I mean, obviously I'm a data, number, statistics guy, but numbers like that, don't lie. So it speaks volumes that you've had some good success in that area for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
I want to really dive into, I mean, I think as a business owner, especially if you're out there listening to the show, you throw out the word exit planning. And, if you're in a room full of business owners or you're at a networking event, I think that means so many different things to people. And there's such kind of a wide spectrum of what that could be, what that could look like. So I want to hear from you and kind of your perspective on it. I mean, what it really means to do exit planning. And then I want to get into a service that you guys have on, you call it Ready for Exit. And it's a lot of, evaluation and kind of figuring out, like, are you really ready to sell? And so, yeah, let's kind of take the conversation that way and, kind of share what it means to you on the exit planning side.
Yeah, it's a great topic. Lots to pull from and cover and discuss. So thank you for that softball. So exit planning historically is kind of what financial planning was in the 70s. So it's a little bit new still. And because of its newness, there is a level of ambiguity around what does it mean. It's great that organizations like EPI and others have created this awareness of what exit planning is and that it is even a thing to begin with. I think now moving forward, the people who are touching the business owner, whether it's wealth management, CPAs, attorneys, business succession people, people in my position, I think it's up to us to kind of move that forward a little bit further in defining what exit planning is. And to be fair, I think it's different for different disciplines. Ultimately, the wealth manager's potentially going to have a different practice than the M&A advisor. The point is, hopefully, that all of those disciplines become better aligned with how to serve, maximize, handle the exit strategy, and ultimately the exit event. So that's a little bit. Our practice around the Ready for Exit. So Ready for Exit was a brainchild figuring out a way to do it better. It's really born out of need to not spin wheels and to produce best results for the client. So to get a little bit more technical, Ready for Exit is kind of first principle thinking. So we started with every situation and reason that a deal craters on the way to a closing. And we reverse engineered that to begin with the exit in mind. And so what this is 55 or so question assessment, kind of a SWOT analysis for business owners and the business. And we have a teaching moment on every topic, and then a question that's tied out with that teaching moment. And then there's 4 different scenarios to choose from in terms of what answer best fits the business owner's position currently. And so all of these things are assessed, and there's a completion rate once we get done. So the interesting thing is the completion rate itself goes against valuation range. Valuation range is largely comprised of financial performance. So your company is worth 5 to 10 million at a time. Great. We have that based on the financials and the comp sources for yields and multiple schedules, et cetera. Once we have the range and the completion rate, we say, well, you scored 50%. So following the practice, the suggestion would be, we'll take you to market around 7.5. So it's actually quantified and they have incentives. And at this point, they can go back and look at the matrix and go, okay, well, the report suggests that we are weak in these categories. I really do want that 10 million. I don't want to leave 2.5 on the table. So I'm going to go back and start working on those points. And maybe it takes 6 months or 18 months or whatever it may be, but they have an opportunity to assess accurately what their valuation means and how they can go back and improve it. That is very valuable to us and to the clients because it's hard to understand if anything's successful if you can't measure it. So we really wanted a measuring device, a ruler for exit readiness. And this is what we've come up with. So every question is either through the lens of personal readiness or business attractiveness. And that's directly from EPI. So when you do that, you have to assess both of those things because I'm sure you see in your practice as well, if the business owner's ready, but the business is not, or vice versa, you're going to have diminishing returns on the process. Both have to be 100% aligned. So that's been very helpful. And, moving forward, hopefully we're currently working on a way to open source that technology for business owners because we just think it's that valuable.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to dive a little bit more into the details here, and maybe we can talk about a case study or something like that. I mean, so a lot of these assessments on the ready for exit are kind of the results that they're going to get. Maybe they don't have enough processes in place to really hand this off to the next owner. I mean, what are you seeing as far as, timelines on how long it takes to really implement some of these things that the business doesn't currently have and really kind of have it fixed and in order to really improve the valuation?
That's a good question as well. I'm going to give you the attorney response. It depends.
Sure.
So it kind of depends on what their expectation is personally of value. A lot of times, what we see as the triggering event is the business valuation itself, the financial one. So you start with, again, adjusted earnings, usually snapshot of the last few years, find the appropriate multiple. There's a math equation there, and it's incredibly important, but it's the initial step. So that usually becomes the triggering event because now you can provide the accurate information to the business owner to say, this is your baseline. But without that, they have nothing to compare it against. There's no contrast. So
Sure.
they can't say, well, I want to be here if they don't know where they are currently. And that's what a business valuation does, is it identifies where they're at. So that's why I'd say it kind of depends. If they look at that valuation gap based on where they want to be in reality, then they can say, it's going to take me 2 years to do this, or it's going to take me 6 months. Sometimes, if it's just a few months of cleanup and readjustments, then we'll help them do that. But for anything that's kind of larger than outside of the 3 month time period, usually is a little bit heavier of a lift. So we'll suggest, well, how about you work with these business succession folks, for example? They can help you. This is what they do. So it depends. And that's why it depends.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I just think, for a lot of owners, I think a lot of owners think that an exit takes less time than it really does. I guess that's kind of my perspective is their timeline. A lot of business owners that I've talked to, they think they can sell and get out of the business in a shorter timeline than what it really takes most of the time, I guess has been my experience, but would love to hear from your side as well, what you've seen there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of business owners think of this as a transaction, which is not inaccurate. However, the transaction is what happens at the end. What happens prior to that is a journey, a
Yep.
transition, a process. So they're right in thinking that this is a transaction, but there's a lot that has to transpire before that transaction occurs. So that is and I just told a business owner client yesterday, I believe. I told him, I said, look, I wouldn't get too excited either way. I mean, rule of thumb, don't celebrate until the check clears. One. Two,
Sure.
this is, even if we go to market tomorrow, it can absolutely take 6 to 8 months. So there's really no level of excitement that you need to come by at the moment
Sure.
because it is a process. So,
Yeah, and that's now that 6 to 8 month timeline. I mean, I'm assuming that means the business is ready to go today, and that's just a timeline of like due diligence on the buyer side, a timeline of putting together financing on the buyer side. Like that 6 to 8 month timeline is probably just for those things, right?
very much so. The discovery and the due diligence, 100%. And hopefully you don't have false starts as well, because false starts can set you back 5 months at a time.
Sure, and that
And
would
that,
that would be like a buyer like saying, yes, I want to, kind of go through the process, and then like maybe they get to the funding stage and they don't get funded because they don't have enough down or can't get approved, something like that. That's what you're meaning by a false start.
yep, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it could
Yeah,
be a
I think
number of different things.
I think that, that gives me a really good perspective on, we're probably looking at a 6 to 8 month process here. And I think that's more than reasonable, right? I mean, you think about going out and buying a house that's, a couple $100,000, and that, that process takes 45, 60 days. If we're moving a multi-million dollar business, it definitely makes sense that, this thing is going to take several months, and probably depending on, how dependent it is on you as the owner, the new owner might expect you to stay around even after it sells.
Yes. Yep. I think all that's accurate. Generally speaking, post sale, depending on the opportunity and the technical aspect of the operation and industry, there's 3 to 5 months of training. And then usually past that, there's some level of consulting, usually for a negotiated hourly rate. And that's if post employment is not already included. Because
Yeah,
sometimes it's a part of the deal, depending on the buyer and the business, that the founder and the owner are going to stay on post close for some level of employment structure.
sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I want to go back a minute because I just thought of something from your ready to for exit assessment. What are some of the common things that you see need to be improved, like kind of on the analysis
Okay,
would be deemed like a weakness?
got it. So once we complete the assessment, kind of what are
Yep.
the glaring topics? Yeah. So
Yeah, what are some common things that usually need to be fixed? Yep.
yeah, well, you've mentioned it quite a few times already, and I would say, top of the list is owner reliance.
Yep. Okay.
And there's a lot that goes into that in terms of assessing it and diagnosing and then fixing that problem. So I would say owner readiness in general, or owner reliance in general. Do you have SOPs? Do you have employee handbooks? Do you have anything that represents how to operate the business that is outside of your mind?
Yeah.
Is new technology? Paper is still good. It's better than nothing.
Sure.
Are there standard operating procedures available? So one of the quick assessments is, how many vacations did you take last year, right? How many hours a week are you working in and on the business? Because what we're looking for is, can the business survive without you? Because if it can, then you have a transferable asset.
Sure.
If not, then you own a very valuable job. There's a difference there.
Yep.
So I'd say owner reliance is a big one. I would say financials. How prepared and how ready are your financials? We're currently working with a very interesting company. We're dancing with them, and they have 4 tax returns for the operation, and two, the fiscal doesn't follow calendar.
Sure.
And there's a lot of revenue and expense sharing between the entities, and it is not obvious what the company is actually earning. So financial preparation and clarity has a lot to do there in terms of whether the business is ready to be sold. That's number two. Let me
Yeah.
think. Number three would be, do you have the ability to scale? Does the company have the ability to scale? Are they completely optimized? I don't think that I've ever seen a buyer purchase anything that doesn't have room to grow.
Sure.
They don't buy to the top of the mountain. They want an opportunity to expand and grow what they're purchasing. And so that's another one. And then some other things that hinder saleability that come out is both customer and vendor concentration. So getting that diversity within both suppliers and customers and clients becomes a big deal. Obviously, just risk mitigation.
Yep.
So those are a few things that kind of stand out.
Yeah, and I just want to define that real quick, just for my audience that might not be familiar. But, customer concentration, basically, if you have, one customer or two customers, handful of customers that make up a large percentage of, the revenue volume of the business, that can be obviously very dangerous. You lose a big account, makes a massive difference in revenue, and then ultimately probably makes a big difference in earnings, which is, really value of the business. So I think as an owner, a lot of times that gets overlooked. But I think looking at, take your revenue reports and kind of who's paying you and looking at, do we have any, big clients on the books, and how can we also, sign up new accounts and grow the business to kind of dilute that percentage.
Yeah, because 100% you're accurate in what you're saying. If there's concentration, a lot of times the market will respond accordingly and say, well, I'll honor this price. However, it's not going to be cash at close. It's going to be based on the retention of that concentrated client or customer.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, I mean, obviously, if we're changing ownership, especially if you have a customer concentration, that's dependent on maybe the owner having a relationship with that customer. I mean, that could really be affected. I mean, vendors, not so much. As a business, you can probably still go back to that vendor and still buy. But you could have vendor relationships too, where maybe the previous owner was getting discounts because they had been a loyal customer for so long. So it can affect on both sides, but I think the customer part is probably more dependable, I would think.
Agreed. I think that's a great point. We should have you over. You should come over to Capstone and start consulting with some of our clients here.
I appreciate that. I mean, I understand the financial approach of things, and what you described a few minutes ago with having multiple tax returns on different fiscal year end dates can make things complicated. And we could run down that road too, just on, what does it take to make, adjustments to figure out what is the owner really getting out of the business? Because your tax return doesn't just come out and say that either, right?
No, it does not. No, it does not. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the opposite. So, business owners underneath tax law can effectively reduce their net income and taxable income, and they do. They absolutely do, and they should. So it's like somebody in my position's responsibility to go back in there and find out how they're doing that effectively.
Sure.
And then communicate and figure out a way to convey that to not only them, but to the market, because a majority of the valuation is going to be comprised of financial performance. So yeah, that's an integral part of what we do.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, and that can become a complicated equation. I think the valuation and then multiple, and then this is maybe what you're worth, is a lot simpler of an equation, but going back and adding back some expenses and owner benefits, that can be a much more complicated equation that, bringing in, a team like you've got can really, really help owners and even buyers really kind of get a full picture of what's going on and understand, the true benefit that would be there if they bought the business.
Yeah, it definitely can. Yeah, we use modeling. We have our own internal spreadsheets that kind of act as dashboards, and you have to see the matrix. You have to see the inconsistencies, the anomalies. So it's, best practice to put all of that on one place and in one place, so you can see really what the numbers are trying to tell you. Otherwise, you don't really know the questions to ask.
For sure. For sure. Well, Jared, I have absolutely loved this conversation. I love what we've dived into today. I think we've put a lot out there for business owners to think about. Where is the best place for them to connect with you, connect with your team, learn more about Ready for Exit, and really be able to work with you?
Yeah. So our website for Capstone is capstonema.com. And then Ready for Exit is readyforexit.com.
Love it.
So those are two good places. My LinkedIn is the only social that I have, and which is enough because it gets busy. But my LinkedIn is a great way to connect in general. I check it every day, probably too much. And so finding me on LinkedIn, Jared Ribley, those are good ways to connect.
Love that. Yeah, we'll make sure to get all those links in the show notes. Jared, again, I want to thank you for coming on and being a guest and all the great information you've shared here today. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time.
I highly appreciate what you do, your practice, and your line of questioning and interest as well, because it's a valuable topic. So thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, until next time, everybody, go and accelerate your profits. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kimler. Make sure to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to check the show notes for our guest contact information and to connect with Ryan on his website, netprofitcfo.com.